7:55. Could we please call the roll?
Commissioners Rahman,
Present.
Long,
Here.
Howell. Here. Cavell.
Here.
Charles,
Present.
Weipert.
He's here. He's in the other
Okay.
room.
Hoffman,
Present.
Woodward, here's ex officio. Markham,
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Let's all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next up, we have the approval of the minutes from the January 18th meeting. I need a motion. Commissioner Powell, supported by Commissioner Long. All in favor, let's prompt the vote on approval of the minutes, if there are no comments or questions. Commissioner Weipert has arrived.
Yes.
Okay.
What's this one?
Approving the minutes.
Yes. Sorry.
And Cavell, is Cavell here? Okay, got it.
Bells?
Cavelsi. You got it.
Woodward,
Yes.
Madam Chair, we have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, minutes are approved. Next up is approval of today's agenda. I just want to make a couple of notes here. We have reordered item number 9 to bring public transit up in the order so that the local providers can get out of here at a reasonable hour. And also, we removed the one item in EDI that we talked about postponing till a later meeting. And I think that's we do have a closed session at the end. Okay, so with that, I need a motion to approve the agenda. Commissioner Charles, supported by Commissioner Long. I'll please prompt the vote. There we go.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
Got it.
There you go, yeah. All right, thank you.
Wonderful team, and it's always me. I didn't learn to fish.
Woodward,
Yes. It's funny.
Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, thank you. Agenda is approved. Next up is public comment. This public comment is for anything currently on today's agenda. If there's anyone from the public who wishes to address us, please come to the end of the table, and you have 3 minutes. Seeing no one, I will close this public comment. We have a public comment at the end if someone cares to come. So, shoot. I thought we were going to put IT behind the,
You want to change it?
yeah, can we,
I approved it, yeah, who did the agenda? I did it, I think, too.
yeah, we actually want to put the transit stuff first.
You can do that by just stating it if you want.
I can? Okay, so we're going to move item 9A
Right now.
now
Before 7.
in front of 7, just for the purpose of letting the service providers for these transit operations answer any questions people might have and then get the heck out of here and onto their,
And they've been here all morning.
and they have been here since 9 a.m., so.
And they have buses to run.
Yes. Okay, so with that, I'm going to open it up to item 9A, which is the Oakland Transit presentation. And we're welcoming Hillary Chambers and her staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome.
We are pleased to be back. We'll try not to repeat everything that we discussed a short time ago, but we do have 3 new commissioners here, so good morning. Probably most importantly, I think always to repeat what we said at the beginning of ED&I, which is the expression of our gratitude, mine most very much of the staff. Since the voters approved the transit millage in November, Brett Razigan, who, as you know, is our manager of planning, and his colleague Kristen Wolfang have been just tremendous in terms of their work specifically on transit. We wouldn't be here today but for, their talented efforts. Also, Bill DeBase, and I want to get it right, DiBiase from Corp Council. Has really taken this on as a passion project, and we deeply appreciate his legal work. He's been supported in Corp Council, of course, by Aaron Thomas and Solon Phillips. All of the providers who we've met with, several times and have been really great partners. The communities and those of you who represent communities outside of these footprints, have been helpful in terms of helping us think through those areas. Chairman Woodward, who has just been instrumental in supporting our efforts. So I just want to make sure, even though we stated it this morning, it can't be said enough how grateful we are for those efforts. Also just want to say, this is a start. What we said in November, just 2.5 months ago, is that we wanted to kind of get this new foundation in place. We probably don't have the answers to all of your questions. There's probably things that we didn't quite get right that we need to think through better, but we wanted to get the foundation started so that we can have contracts with these providers to preserve the services that they're doing and to do some expansions within their current footprints, and very much to think through the vision going forward. So it is a first step. You'll probably see a lot of transit activity, going forward, and we'll talk a little bit about some of that today. Yes.
Sorry, Chair, can we close that door? Whatever noise out
Oh,
there.
you take that closed
It's
session sign
distracting.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sorry. I just didn't want her to keep
No,
talking.
thank you.
I can barely focus.
So just a quick review in terms of what's happened since November, and this is all kind of from last year. You all moved quickly. Our residents did see this on their December tax bills. You created a transit division within economic development. That position for a manager and 2 planners have been posted. Interviews have been ongoing. We have one again this afternoon. So we're hopeful of bringing on some staff expertise. And of course, the treasurer and our CFO, Kyle Jen, who's here, established the transit fund for receipt of the millage. We established the goals, as I mentioned earlier, of having these foundational agreements in place. You'll see that we're coming forward with a new idea that kind of came from the conversations that we had to create a 2023 local reimbursement program for some of those communities that are outside of the footprint of the current providers. You'll see in the contracts, they're basically based on what the providers can do with their current infrastructure or what they can obtain in the next 30 to 60 days. We've asked, and what they can build for. There are a number of vehicles that are on order. We've kind of removed the purchase of those vehicles from the contract because we want to spend some time together and with other partners thinking through whether there's state and federal funds to help us with some of those larger purchases. We want to make sure that the county money isn't paying for everything, that when there's state and federal money available and the general manager from SMART, can add more to this in terms of the amount of federal money they receive for some of these capital expenditures. Again, ahead of us is the meaningful public and stakeholder outreach and thinking through, expanding the footprints of the providers, what type of services are necessary, and how do we make sure that they are connected by technology and other resources. So today you have before you the 4 interlocal agreements and 1 resolution. We've pooled the professional services one. We'll continue the conversations around that need. So in terms of the agreements, they are, they very much reflect typical county type of interlocal agreements. They were drafted, again, by Corporation Counsel. They're 3-year contracts with 1 year of financing mechanism. This was as a response to some of the feedback that we got from our local communities. Initially, we had indicated to them that we would do 1-year contracts because we wanted to spend this year, thinking about years 2 to 10. But they also want to make sure that they have a sense that we are long-term partners, which of course we are. And so we made a 3-year base contract with the 1-year financing. Each contract has a scope of work. Each contract, the local transit providers has a budget, the insurance requirements approved by risk management, the payment schedule for each, and the reporting requirements. So starting with SMART, the region's mobility provider, there's 2 aspects of their budget. There is ensuring that we preserve the current services that they provide. And so we looked at what the previous millage had raised and the previous budget, and that's the foundation of the budget for SMART. We then asked them, and that's reflected by this map, we then asked them to consider what they could do within their current infrastructure and to expand their reach. And so they came back to us with about a $10 million expansion proposal, which we have before you. That's reflected in this chart and this map. But it's basically eliminating that gap on Woodward that currently exists, so that there will be stops in that dead zone. Extending 3 routes to Novi so that residents can get to work or to where they're going out there. Improving routes from through West Bloomfield, through Orchard Lake, Hego Harbor, and Sylvan Lake. Improving a route that currently operates in Pontiac and Auburn Hills, and adding a new route that would go through Troy up to Rochester and over to Auburn Hills. Of course, all of these expansions in fixed route would come with a federal required ADA paratransit service, which represents about $2 to $3 million of that expansion budget. And this is a map that kind of highlights. You can see in the Novi area, the Grand River, the 12-mile, where in current operations the bus stops, where it would kind of continue. And you can see in green, where there would be new routes. Then we go on to the local providers, the Northern Oakland Transit Authority, Western Oakland Transit Authority, and the Rochester Hills, Oakland Township Older Persons Commission. And again, we asked them the same thing. How can we preserve what you're doing, and what can you do more of, and what can you build toward doing more of? And so those are the budgets that we have before you. Generally, in terms of some highlights, expansion of hours. In some instances, when they were they had to stop service at like 4 o'clock, they're able to extend those hours. A standardization of fares among the local providers, the ability to hire and train drivers. In some instances, in the notice situation where they need to improve their existing parking lot to accommodate the EV vehicles that they're receiving from a SEMCOG grant, that's in there. Equipment, technology, different things that put them in a position to be able to expand later in the year when there's new vehicles available and into 2024. This is a chart that describes what we're suggesting through these 4 contracts, what the millage overall would raise, and then what would flow to OPC, WODA, NODA, and SMART, and what would be remaining. Again, you can remove from that pie chart for now the professional services proposal. The local transit reimbursement program. This really kind of stemmed from conversations that we had that Commissioner Weipert helped organize, that Chairman Woodward has had with some communities. Those communities who are outside any of these current providers, but who are expending resources from their general funds above what they receive in municipal credits on transit services. Some of those communities contract with People's Express, and some of those communities, like Independence Township, do their own services. So we wanted, in this transition period, to make sure that we held harmless any of those communities that were expending their own funds on transportation for their residents. And so we're putting forward for your consideration this one-year local transit reimbursement program, giving ourselves time to figure out what's the best way to expand services in those areas, and of course, working with those communities in that area. And that's,
Would you mind introducing the
yes,
folks
let's
from the
do that.
local
Let's do that now.
service providers?
So, Smart, would you like to start? Come on, you have to come up, remember?
Yeah, you have to come use the microphones.
I'm Dwight Farrell, General Manager at Smart.
Tiffany Gunter, Deputy General Manager, Smart.
Sean Ryapel, Assistant General Counsel at Smart.
And I think Ryan Byrne, who was the Smart CFO, is he on? He's off, okay, he was with us this morning.
Kim Viner, Director of WODA. Amy Grisomkowski, HR and Marketing Manager.
I should say Voda.
Renee Courtright, Executive Director, Older Persons Commission.
Tim Sovey, Administrative Director for the OPC.
Oakland County Government alum.
Lynn Gromoski, Executive Director, North Oakland Transit. Thank you.
Well, thanks, everybody, for coming and being so patient this morning as we crank through all of this information. Really appreciate it. Okay, I'll entertain questions. Commissioner Powell.
So, on the transit service area, where the gray is that just areas that we're not covering, or like why we're not covering it? Because my understanding was all of Oakland County, not no missing areas. So why are we not covering that? If we're not, or is it, just can you explain that? That's my first question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So yes, the areas that are marked are the current service areas of the local providers and of SMART. So the SMART expansion, of course, would extend this to Novi and up to Rochester, and the local reimbursement program for this year would cover any expenditures in those gray or beige areas that the local communities are currently providing. And then the next phase will be, when we think about expansion, does NODA cover more areas? Does WODA cover more areas? Does SMART's Flex Zone cover more areas? Do we continue to contract with People's Express? That's kind of phase 2. But the grayish areas would be, those are basically the communities that would be eligible for the local reimbursement program.
Okay. And then,
Go ahead.
I'll say table it for more information for that local reimbursement, just to get an understanding
Yes.
for time.
Thank you.
So I'll talk about
But,
that later. Now, with the SMART extended routes and routes, right? I just want to make clear that eventually, what you just stated on this route map, you literally can get anywhere in Oakland County. Like, the new routes everywhere, like people can get to wherever they would really like to get countywide. Or is there still some type of hindrance, be it that we're still doing within the phasing? Like,
Yes,
just
I
from my
think-
understanding,
No,
because when we went out and we
Yeah,
advocated, it's like, Oakland County, you can go anywhere. Well, what y'all telling me, that's still, we have a phase out as to when they'll be able to go everywhere.
Right.
And I just want to make sure we're explaining this to our people. right?
Absolutely. We appreciate that. We've adopted the motto
And then
of.
one thing I really, really want to keen on is Novi. My concern, like you said, is great that we got it, but we know it was a lot of politicking and a lot making people like they would get transported to one area and have to walk, 2 miles over to go to work? Like, are we bridging that gap? Also, is one of my questions, so.
Yes,
Thank you. Can you
that,
answer
that-
those,
yes,
please?
thank you. That gap is definitely bridged in terms of the proposal before you.
Okay.
But if I can channel, folks with much more transit expertise than I have, I think that we all have to kind of understand that transit in and of itself is going through an evolution. And SMART is certainly, thinking through this. There are possibilities that areas that were previously even served by fixed route may ultimately be better served by, flex service.
Got it.
And so I think we have to make sure that we understand that we're being nimble in terms of, before we reach any conclusion, that it is always, I don't know what many feet buses there are, but, SMART will tell you that that's, that in the next 20 to 30 years, that's very much going to change. So that's why this is just a first step.
Okay. And then my last,
There's two limiting factors that we have right now. So operators of the vehicles and actually getting the vehicles. And so that's why you're not seeing a large expanse of services right now, because SMART is having a very difficult time just hiring bodies and people to.
yeah, because that was my third question.
operate the
'cause
system.
I know, it's
Yep.
very challenging everywhere with the employment,
It
and
is.
this is like a real robust thing, we're excited, but the reality is we need to know the reality. So okay, thank you, you already answered my last one, because that's what I wanted to know is how is SMART going to transition? Because we know there were some challenges before.
Yeah,
But it's
and
good
we're not going to
for us
underestimate those challenges and the improvements that need to happen with basic services. And, we as a region are very much, working together with SMART in terms of the workforce demand needs that they have.
Good to hear.
But I want to let you know that Jennifer Llewellyn's team on workforce is working with SMART on a really exciting recruitment event at M1, where we'll be able to drive buses.
Okay, good.
So,
Thank you.
Fast, like in a circle, like in the movie.
I'm just happy we're putting it out early.
Yes.
We know that there are some challenges. We ain't coming in with lies and false, just
Yes.
falseness. So thank you. Thank you very much.
under promise and over deliver.
Exactly. Thank you. I'm done.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Powell. Commissioner Cavell?
Thank you. I just had a question about the pie chart y'all did, and if I heard right, it's this funding on slide 12, and in the resolutions, it's funding for 1 year, but with a 3-year contract, and the pie chart represents 1 year of millage capture, right? So there will be, it's expected if nothing changes, 15 million-ish would be remaining each year, but we're expecting things to change. Okay, thanks for that clarification. And this also doesn't include federal monies or state monies or potential bonding or anything like that that we could also get in grants and other forms of dollars. So then there's a potential for like further expansion as time goes on in all sorts of different ways. This is just what we're getting locally, right?
Yes, that is true, Commissioner Cavell. I will say that when SMART presents to us, for example, that expansion budget, they have included in there the notion that they would receive 29% of the local bus operating funds. So it's actually probably a $12 million expansion, but they know they'll receive those funds in order to, when they do the expansion.
Okay, cool. And then just to kind of piggyback off what Commissioner Powell asked about staff pay, I have heard that AATA and DDOT pay, I don't remember the rates, but are we competitive, I guess is my question, or is SMART competitive? And also, is there any consideration to the millage being used for that, or is that not what it should be used for?
Well, I guess I will say two things. There is bullets in there that you'll see amongst the local providers. We've had a conversation about, and they have different types of drivers, right? So their drivers don't have CDLs because they're operating different types of vehicles. But there definitely is a bullet in there about, and they've talked together, about what they might pay their drivers so that they can increase their wages and remain competitive. So that they included in their budgets. SMART and Mr. Farrell can address this, is currently in negotiations with their drivers. But not only just about wages, about work rules, and a lot of other things, as we know, are really important to a new era of employees and drivers. I mean, Dwight started in this business as a driver. And so, yes, those are ongoing negotiations, but their intention is to remain as competitive as possible.
And we pay more than DDOT does right now.
Okay, cool.
So, but if I could just expand just a little bit. One of the challenges in the industry, it's not just Metro Detroit, Southeast Michigan, is attracting people. The MBTA, which is the transit system in Boston, has 2,000 vacancies as we speak. When I started, there was a line of people trying to get a job as a bus operator, but the world's changed since then. So we're in, as Ms. Chambers mentioned, we are in negotiations with our labor unions to address those issues specifically. Because it's not just a pay issue, it's the work rule issue. And quite frankly, some of the work rules were work rules that were in place when I was a driver. That won't work today. Quality of life has a completely different meaning in 2023 than it did in 1980. Quality of life was based on money then. Now it's based on time you spend with your family. So we have to change, we have to negotiate to change rules in order to be able to do that. So I assure you that we will be as competitive as any private provider, any private employer, to be able to retain talent, not just bus operators, mechanics, and cleaners. And I'll also say that we're also working to diversify our both management staff and across the board to reflect this community. There's a significant Arab population of which we are underrepresented in. There's a significant Hispanic population in this area of which we are underrepresented in that we are working to address. So by expanding in those areas, we think it gives us an opportunity to be able to fill positions. As Ms. Chambers also said about the come drive a bus, a lot of people are afraid of driving a vehicle. It's intimidating. So we want you to come out and try it. And so any of you all who are looking for opportunities on the board, if you want to come work for SMART in addition to your day job, you can come out and drive a bus or a pair of transports. Not quite, but the idea behind that is to eliminate some of the barriers that are there now just from people. And we just had an event. When was it, Tiffany?
Yesterday and the day.
Where we actually, you came in person, you applied. If we hired you, we sent you for your test. We got how many?
16 on day one, and we're all good.
Now, that's pending background investigation checks. So, so we are actively doing that in order to be able to meet this demand.
Cool.
Got it, thank you.
Sure.
And as the son of a Teamster bus driver, I appreciate your response. Thank you.
There you go. That was a nice job, too.
Well, I don't know
You're
the CEO,
hiring.
but yeah.
We'll get you one.
Thank you. Any other commissioners with, okay. Commissioner Woodward has an amendment for item 9F,
When we
right?
get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I guess from a finance point of view and perspective that I think is mindful for everyone, and particularly on this committee, and Hillary talked about the state and federal match opportunities in the last meeting. Those who were there talked about the acquisition of vehicles, and there's federal dollars to be able to do this, and figuring out how to leverage the $67 million that this millage produces to get as much LBO, state match, and other federal dollars. Taking advantage of the bipartisan infrastructure is the priority to bring those dollars to be able to run the most robust and achieve all the vision. I mean, the vision was to make transit better for everyone, to ensure there's access for everyone, and it's going to look different in different places, and it's going to take some time to do that. And this is, I think, a huge leap forward. The other thing I just want to be on the Finance Committee's top of mind. Every local downtown development authority is also capturing this millage, and it gets captured into their coffers. And so I encourage commissioners to reach out to your local DDAs, start opening up conversations. How are we going to use that money to improve mobility and transit in our area? And it can be done in a variety of ways. And I think the right way is to, like, let's have some flexibility as long as it's being used for that purpose. If it's not being used for that purpose, then we're going to have to change state law to require it to be used for that purpose. But it's millions of additional dollars that can be brought into this equation to help connect our downtowns, improve mobility, partner with all these agencies that are doing really great work. And so be always on the look for that. I have one finance.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to add on to that, just from a perspective. Transportation enhancements are not just buses and frequency. It's infrastructure.
Right.
It's bus stops. It's sidewalks. It's curb cuts. It's all of those things. So there are people who would be able to use a fixed route bus and would prefer to use a fixed route bus than use paratransit, but they can't get there because the infrastructure, either where they live or where they're trying to go, prevents them from doing that. So when you're talking to the DDAs, signal improvements, there's a whole host of different things. And even bus stop locations, we have we're going to put an RFP out later this year to examine every bus stop in this region, including the ones that are done by DDOT. Because we want to have better coordination between DDOT and SMART, because people don't just operate in Oakland County, they operate in Wayne and Macomb and what have you. And so, again, it's all of those things that make a public transportation system work.
And just, the two other points is that, the last meeting is as it relates to the SMART contract. You see on this map the, proposed new routes that can be done extending with the existing capacity, but also all the routes that also exist in all the service. And so some companion document so that everyone can see that, to see how they intersect with each other. Because I was talking to someone, they said, look, well, how do you get around here? I'm like, well, there are actually other routes that are in place right now, and that these things are actually attempting to connect these things. And then the last piece, and I know, Hillary and I have talked about this, and since we have our CFO in the House, so we're transitioning from the OCPTA that collected the SMART millage in the past. And those dollars, I know that there is an existing contract in place that runs. Does the dollars tie? Do we get the answer to that? Was there excess dollars? So whenever one ends, basically, I'm trying to say.
Just so everyone knows, sorry.
OCPTA collects the money for the millage, and we were running service. Those dollars would run out because that millage is no longer, and it has no more money coming into it. So where is the point in which those monies are used, and then these monies start?
Right. And I think that, and Jody is here as well, so she can help support this answer, because the Oakland County Public Transit Authority, the Treasurer's Office transferred the funds, and they had extended the contract with SMART through June of this year.
Correct.
In part to ensure that while the millage was on the ballot, there is at least a contract extended in case, so that they were prepared for the outcome. And I think that's added to a little bit of confusion. Did that extension come with money? So Kyle, do you want to address the kind of the flow of proceeds from the millage and if there's any excess?
Sure. So, briefly, if you think about the last millage that was levied under the old millage, that was levied in December of 2021. It passed through the Oakland County Public Transit Authority, and SMART received about $31 million in the first few months or the first half of the year of 2022. Now, with the new millage, which runs through the county budget, for that baseline level of services, again at about $31 million. The millage was levied this past December, and we've structured the payments with them so that they'll receive that $31 million over 6 months in the first half of this calendar year. So it's very comparable, from a cash flow perspective, for that baseline level of service.
But any of the proceeds that were levied from 2021 would only be like go ahead, Jody.
Kyle can speak to it as well, but, I mean, the only thing that stays in the OCPTA is the cost for administrative, the accounting cost, the legal cost, the audit cost. That's basically what stayed in OCPTA, and those costs, I think, are continuing because we have to get through the fiscal year and continue expending those. So I think that's the only thing that's left in the OCPTA.
But after the first part of the year.
It's all expended, correct?
But the monies that come in after are tied to delinquencies, or, you know what I
There
mean?
are
Like, there is a
yeah.
trickle of funds that
through the
come in
rest of the
after
year.
that people
Right.
pay their winter tax bills.
Correct.
But it's not, could
It's
you
not
estimate the
substantial at
trickle?
all. Under 100,000, I think.
Okay. Is that your answer?
Well,
Trickle?
Well, now, I understand what's in the OCPTA budget. So the smart millage before was levied in the summer. And went summer to summer, and that's why, because it wasn't a November millage, it was a August miller. I'm
But it's
pretty
still
sure.
levied in December. The ballot, it was on the August, but it was still levied on the winter tax bill.
Oh, it was always in the, okay.
Yeah, these
I
have
thought-
always been on the
I-
winter tax bill.
That was way more
I thought it.
property.
Yeah, so the
So we're
money's
sure-
usually
it was
expended
all-
in the first
So even though we had,
calendar
so it's always been in the winter tax bill?
That was
So-
my understanding.
Okay, because I would have impression it was in the summer tax bill. So where it's.
I think almost
positive, it's
all the
always on
authorities
winter.
are on the winter tax
Yeah,
bill,
they-
Dave.
I mean, I know it's in the winter now.
No, all the authorities are on the
They've
winter.
always been in the winter tax
Our-
bill. Okay. Well, that was
all the
because
funds
if it was on a different calendar, because then we were bringing the money different places. So the argument, like the dollars from the last millage, basically that money has all been consumed. There is nothing that's unused. There's no surplus revenue.
Not in OCPTA, there's not surplus revenue.
And Jody would know that because they're two different funds.
That's right.
So
They're
anything that
completely
comes
separate.
over,
Right.
trickles in from the OCPTA would stay in the OCPTA.
Correct.
Where anything in the new millage would be in the transit fund. So you would know, be able to report on
Yes.
the trickle.
Okay.
Yes.
And so that means, so the contract, when it was extended to run through the summer, there was no dollars that went with it. It was basically just keep
Right.
doing what
It
you're
was
doing.
just, yes, it was, it was
So in theory, it
basically a
was-
backstop.
It was borrowing money
Well-
we didn't have.
Well, actually, it was there in case, God forbid, that the millage failed, so
Well,
that
yeah,
we'd
right.
be able to wind the service down. That
You'd at
was-
least have a contract
You
for
could at least have
services
a
in
contract
place,
with
that
services
even though
in
you
place.
didn't have new money flowing
Right.
into
So
it.
now,
Because the contract went till June. Yes.
Right.
that's right, okay. That answers it, Mike. Okay, that's more clarification. Good, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Long?
Oh, so Dave, you sparked a question for me. So the 66 million, 66.2 million that we're collecting the first year, does that not include the DDAs yet?
It will never include the DDAs.
Okay.
DDAs capture it themselves.
All right, but then that money that they're capturing for that tax is to be used for transit, that's what you're saying?
We're hoping.
Well, that's.
Yeah, we're hoping.
It should, I mean, so statutorily, they aren't actually legally required unless the law is changed. Remember with the zoo and the DIA, there were some community DDAs that said, I want to use this for something else. And
Okay.
And Eileen Kowal led the charge to change, goes, oh, no. And they changed the law so that money had to go to those things.
So there might have to be a lot.
We could,
changed
or
if
I'm more optimistic, because these are downtown development authorities, and mobility and connectivity is important, and to the infrastructure piece. And the DDAs are using dollars to improve the infrastructure so a bus can stop, or a commuter bus can come in and out, and that's great. We want to inventory that, we want a conversation about what that is, and we want to monitor it, but it's millions of dollars of additional money that's available for improving transit across this county. And we want to make sure it goes to it, so it's.
So you're saying for the business corridors and the DDAs and stuff, it's an incentive that they can get people there, so they're, you know.
Right, but, I mean, I'll be honest, I bet most of your DDAs don't know. Some of your executive directors will know, because they just got a report, they're like, oh, there's 0.95 more money in this fund that wasn't here last year. So I think be proactive. I think commissioners reaching out to your communities and asking them, like, what's the plan? And they might say, I don't have a plan. And I think that there's a coordinating aspect to this, working with our smaller providers, SMART, to figure out like what's the best way to use these dollars, because they could also use those dollars to supply match and pull down potentially other federal and state monies to build up robust transit.
And Chairperson Charles had asked if members of the board could be provided the list of those
Okay.
entities,
Yeah, I knew
because
that.
Brett, I think it said there were 21 to 23 of those capture entities across the county.
Okay.
I think it would also be good for finance to actually get, I mean, we can just ask the treasurer's office or equalization to say, how much money are we talking about? I'm guessing it's about $5 to $7 million, but that's back of the napkin math. So we can probably get that. I think it'd just be helpful
That'd be
for
a
us
good
to know.
report. Can we get that? Who
Yeah,
would?
we'll have staff work with, it's probably equalization, so we'll have staff work with equalization, and then we'll just like make sure the treasurer says, yes, that's correct.
I
Okay.
think it's,
That
I
makes
think if I'm doing the math correctly, it's probably a smaller number. It's about 7 million for our general property tax levy, you know, which is 4
okay.
mills, so
Oh,
I think
so-
we're probably talking about something more in the ballpark of about 2 million.
2 or 3? Oh, well, that's still $2 or $3 million.
Which is real money.
Dollar budget anyway. Okay.
Commissioner Rahman, did you have a question?
No, I'm good.
Okay, Commissioner Powell.
So what about communities that don't have a DDA? Like, or is it the main street? Like, how does this work? And the only reason why I'm asking, because SMART does a lot of business in Pontiac. And if somehow our mayor's supposed to capture something or downtown's supposed to capture something, it needs to be on his radar. And I just want to know, like, is it an option for them or no? Because I don't
Or
understand this
DDA.
DDA thing anyway.
Does Pontiac have a
No, they
DDA or
don't. We only got
nothing?
Main Street.
Right, yeah. So we're talking about these
If we were to
entities.
capture something, I just want to know, like, what is that something? I don't
Yeah,
know. Right.
no, this is, so these entities exist to support economic development that capture these tax revenues before it goes to other things, and
Okay.
that's for economic development. So if Pontiac doesn't have one, there is no tax capture there. Doesn't mean, I mean, obviously, Pontiac's a hub, is connected to
But he
electric transit.
brought up you know, even if we have any responsibility in the city of Pontiac to make sure these bus stops, our infrastructure is together, this, that, or the other, you know, I just want to make sure we have a very robust conversation with them so they know what their responsibilities are as a city, be it if, you know, because we in new leadership, and I don't know if that's on their radar. So I just want to bring that to SMART's attention. So thank you.
Okay. Mr. Estes.
Just to expand on it a little bit, I think DDAs are generally used as the term, the general term, but there's also corridor improvement authorities, tax increment finance authorities, and local development finance authorities. So there's a whole bunch of,
But none of those are factored into the 66 million?
no, there's a lot of,
Okay.
they're all keeping that millage increase to all of those tax
Okay.
increment finance
So
authorities.
with those entities, through these communities, I govern Pontiac, and we've had a lot of transition of bad leadership, and I just wanna make sure this city knows what their responsibilities are, be it on our end of what they need to contribute to these, anything dealing with the transportation.
think
Because a
that-
lot
I
of
think-
routes go through my city.
I think that capture is a parallel conversation, but I
Okay.
think just building on what you said, I did want to just mention, and it does kind of connect with what Mr. Farrell said in terms of the bus stops. I do think there should be a healthy conversation between Pontiac and SMART in terms of the service, because I think that what SMART is thinking through is, you know, instead of SMART financing the upkeep of what could be hundreds of bus stops across the region, maybe they should reach a partnership and pay the local communities to maintain the bus stops. So I do think that there should be a healthy conversation that you all can facilitate in terms of the service that Pontiac receives.
Yeah, I just, so we know.
Okay.
We ahead of the country.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else have any questions or comments for this transit group?
I do. On the screen.
Commissioner Charles.
So it just struck my interest when we were talking about TIF again, and I guess I was thinking about the Brownfield conversation from this morning, but when we talk about those capture entities, or agencies that are capturing, we said DDA. What are the other ones?
Corridor improvement.
So actually, we weren't just throwing those out. And then TIF, would be a capture element too?
Yeah.
And then each of us have TIFs at some point, we come to these TIF meetings from time to time. I just want to make sure I'm under, kind of to what Commissioner Powell was saying, all these various capture orgs. making sure I understand how I can best advocate for them, or if they don't know certain things, how I can make sure to share that. But I don't want to overwhelm you with lists, but if we could also, I think you're the chair of TIF. If we could.
I was, I don't think I am again, but
I
yes.
just want to
I
make.
mean, I think that, and Chairman Woodward knows this better, but it is a parallel conversation because the state has set up a taxing system which allows these local authorities to collect the tax money in order to do something within their economic development for that region. And so as has it, when the county passes a new millage, it's included in something that's captured. And so we take note, right? Oh, by the way, you're now going to be capturing this additional money. How are you going to spend it? So it is a little bit of a separate conversation. And it, you know, sometimes you could say it frustrates people, right? Because if they weren't capturing money, it would be going to transit services. But policymakers have decided from an economic development point of view, it makes sense to have this capture notion, right? And, you know, so that it is a bit of a separate conversation that we're just kind of taking note of, that we want to maybe have conversations on parallel with these entities who we know are receiving some increased revenue because we've started this new tax, and potentially they could spend it on transit type things.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just also say, like, perhaps this is a caucus conversation, because I just want to make sure there's no double taxation. If it's a pie of 100%, how much of it out of a homeowner, just one home, you know, how many different lanes are they being, I don't want to say assessed, but, you know, if these are like the TIF, for example, or special assessments and things like that, I just want to make sure I'm clear, because we all get those tax bills, line by line by line. Where do you actually see that as a homeowner, as a person? You don't? Okay. So there's a millage, people paid into the millage, it's X amount of dollars. That millage isn't complete without then the DDAs and all these other orgs paying into it. It just seems like the same taxpayer is being asked to pay multiple times, but you're saying no, that is not the case.
They're not paying into it, it's being set aside.
Being divvied up behind the scenes.
Right.
Like if you were a resident inside a DDA, like, your contribution to this went to the DDA, didn't come to the county.
Mm-hmm.
And I can double, so it's not double.
Right.
A lot of the DDAs and CIAs are in areas where there's not a lot of residential,
Right.
right? But it just sets that money aside. I'll use Novi as an example. We created a corridor improvement authority in 2017. They haven't really spent much of the money. They've collected over $500K. Now they're collecting all the transit money as well. So I'm going to go back to the city now and say, what can we do with that DDA money to support this transit plan that's coming through here? Because you're capturing transit money that needs to be fed back into building bus stops, et cetera.
Okay. There's the light bulb. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. All right, anybody else have any questions? Comments? All right, we're going to try and vote on all of the elements of this under item 7 at the same time, but I have a note here that says, under 9. No, wait. Oh, no, 9 is the other thing. Okay. So under 7, we're going to vote for everything all at once. Staff, make sure I'm doing this right,
7 or
please.
9?
It's not 9.
Oh, did it get changed?
It is,
It's 7 now.
it is 7 now, I
Okay, we
believe.
moved it up.
Right. Right. So I need a motion.
There, can we break off the local transportation reimbursement one? Into
Okay,
separate?
let's do 7A through E.
Well, I don't know, do we do A as just receive and file? So I think that should be
That's just
separate
the
too,
report.
kind of, shouldn't it? Because it's receive and file, where we're voting on resolutions on
All
the
right,
other.
we'll do them, all right, we'll do A,
Yeah. I think we-
7A
Okay.
as an item, as a receive and file. So I need a motion.
Move that.
Woodward moves it, supported by Long. Okay, so we're voting on 7A. Thank you for your indulgence, folks. if I sound confusing.
Okay. Prompt?
Prompt the vote, please, yes. Thank God we have staff to keep us straight. That's all I can say.
Oh,
Yes.
Powell?
Yes.
Thank you.
And now I'm probably do B.
Hoffman?
The interlocal agreements we'll do together.
Hoffman, did you get the prompt, Commissioner? No?
I
Okay,
vote
just do a
yes.
voice. Okay, thank you. Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, thank you. Try refreshing your, refreshing at the top, Commissioners. All right, next up,
So you want a motion to approve item B, WODA, item C, OPC, and item D, NODA?
and
three
item E,
contracts.
SMART.
And item D, SMART.
Right,
I'll make
and-
that motion.
B through E.
Okay, so Commissioner Weipert made the motion for B through E,
C, D, and E.
supported by Commissioner Cavell. All right, let's prompt the vote.
Okay.
And that's Becky, Charlie, David, Elizabeth?
Correct. Baker, Charlie, I forget what they all are. Sean knows.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Hoffman?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, is he doing the airport ones?
I broke it.
I know those too. Bravo.
Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, next up, we have item 7F, the authorization for the local transportation reimbursement program. I need a motion.
I'll move it.
Commissioner Weipert, supported by Commissioner Hoffman. Any-
And there's, this was covered, there's an amendment there, and I wasn't married to any language, but I mean, as it was described, this is, at least at this juncture, a one-year effort to fully reimburse if a community is using general funds outside what they receive in municipal credits and other things to support transit in the areas that are outlined, so they're not in the SMART areas, the area that SMART had service. They're not funded by other means, but use general fund dollars, whatever that budgetary amount is, that to fully reimburse that for this year. I mean, I just was recommending add 2023 interim in front of the word local transportation reimbursement program. So when we communicate it, that it's clear, it's for 2023, it's interim, and not to be projected as something like, oh, this will be here in 24, 25, 26. Because the idea is to expand service, to be working in concert with everybody. So if, I'm not married to that, that's pretty simple.
So
So changing
that's-
title and also I think changing also is basically in the now therefore be it resolved where it makes sense just to make sure it's all named the same thing.
23 interim
Local,
and
yep.
before local.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see, Commissioner Weipert, you made the motion. You accept that amendment?
Sure.
And Commissioner Hoffman, you're okay with it?
Yes.
So we're voting on the amendment. First. It's the parliamentary stuff that kills me every time. Okay.
Hey, I got my work. I go work now.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Hoffman. There we go.
I'm here, President.
Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, and now we'll vote on the motion on item F, authorization for the local transportation reimbursement program,
As amended.
as amended. See, you keep me honest. All right.
Okay.
Vote. Okay.
Oh, we voted on that and then.
Where did the treasurer end up?
It's in the land bank.
Yeah, it's still under
Madam
eight.
Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you to all the transit providers who spent your whole day here helping us understand what's happening, so really appreciate it.
So they can go back and report, we do work.
Thank you all.
To the what?
Are you going to the 2 o'clock meeting?
Mr. Farrell, thank you. It's nice meeting you. Keep up the good work.
We're trying to make it if we can. Larry Gray's coming too.
Take care, Brad.
So I don't know.
I'll see what time we get done. It's probably be, these are big agendas.
Yes, very much.
It won't be this long every time. Thank you. Get out.
Communications and then the land bank.
Okay.
That's what you want. Land bank is next. Well, yeah, communications. Yeah, that's what I'm missing.
We are.
Oh, we're doing 9 o'clock?
Brendan requested it. And I,
Because we seem to go over a lot.
Just to be clear, you're just right now going to.
well, we will be because your chair has robust meetings now, not just waterway conversations. All right. Oh, is this on?
That's all right.
All right, we're gonna assume,
Yeah, what?
smart, but
Lots of conversation.
comments on the IT. Okay. All right, next up, we have item 8A, Information Technology Executive Summary, and then item 8B, the Service Agreement Reports. I would need a receive and file.
Oh, for both?
Well, let's do a receive and file for both, if we can. Commissioner
So I guess I just have a procedural.
Charles.
Like last committee, we would hear it or get the presentation or the communication and then receive and file. Can we still do that?
It's in the
Don't ask
packet.
questions.
Oh, there's no presenter.
There's no presenter, but
That's
we
fine.
do have, Sean,
Do you have
thank
any
you.
questions?
I haven't had lunch, my brain's getting a little funny. Sean's here, if we have questions, do we want to bring him up to ask questions of?
That's
Do you have
okay.
questions?
I'll ask them individually.
So call Sean instead.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm
Everybody
content with
okay?
that. Mhm.
Or support?
Do I have a motion for receive and file from Commissioner Cowell, Commissioner Hoffman? Okay. I'll go ahead and prompt the vote.
Any discussion? No? Okay. To receive and file.
For receiving and filing the IT information.
Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay. Motion carries. We will move on to item number 9, department recommendations. Here you go, Jody. Item 9A, the interlocal agreement with the Oakland County Land Bank Authority. I need a motion. Commissioner Powell, supported by Commissioner Hoffman. All right, welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Jody Weissler Defoe, Chief Deputy Treasurer. This is Chris Ammerman, an attorney from Corporation Counsel that's been supporting the Land Bank and some other things in the Treasurer's Office. And then Jill Robinson, I think you've been introduced to at least once. She is officially our Executive Director of the Oakland County Land Bank Authority. So you may recall that when we created the Land Bank Authority last year, Chairman Woodward made a request slash suggestion that we do a service agreement between the Oakland County Land Bank Authority and the county. The intention is that the Land Bank Authority would be supported by the Treasurer's Office. There's no budget request in this request because all of it is intended to be inside the Treasurer's Office budget as far as any cost related to the Oakland County Land Bank for the time being, as we work to get some projects and then some money in the door, in the future. But for now, and in this agreement, there is no dollar to be exchanged. It's really an in-kind kind of service agreement from the county's departments to the Oakland County Land Bank Authority. And that's what's before you.
Okay. I will open it up to the commission. If anybody has any questions about it? Okay.
30 seconds.
Seeing none, we made him wait all this time. All right, so let's go ahead and prompt the vote. No, that was just 9.
Did it come up or not?
Everybody get a prompt?
Yeah, I got it twice.
Yeah.
I got it twice, so I voted for
you
Dave
take
Woodward too.
Robin?
He's out of the room.
Okay.
Sounds like Hoffman got yours this time.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is item 9B, the first quarter development report. I need a motion. Commissioner Powell, supported by
Support.
Commissioner Weipert. This is the IT development report. Anybody have any comments or questions?
You might be fizzling out.
No,
Seeing none, let's go ahead and prompt the vote.
It's not?
Yeah, mine, I can't open that.
Do a refresh. Scroll back up and do a refresh.
Here's it come, yeah, hit your refresh button. Maybe I'll let you say.
I'm not able to open that next one.
That's what we're working on right now.
Okay, Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay. All right, next up is item 9C, the interlocal agreement with government bodies for comprehensive IT services.
Mine won't open either.
And that is 2 counties, Lapeer County and Tuscola County.
Oh, Tuscaloosa. They pay a property
I need a
tax.
motion.
I'll move it.
Commissioner Weipert, supported by Commissioner Hoffman. Anybody have any questions or comments? Made Sean sit here and we're not making him work. Okay, let's go ahead and prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Next up, we have item 9D, the elimination of financial burden of reduced price meals for students in Oakland County. I need a motion. Commissioner Charles, supported by Commissioner Cavell.
I am so excited. I thought it was like an hour away for sure. But thank you all. Lori Atkins, are you on this call? Oh, great. Lori, I want to introduce Lori. Can you tell the commissioners your official title?
I work as the child nutrition consultant at Oakland Schools.
So about 6 months ago, I heard that the money through COVID that was being given to our students for free lunch and free breakfast was stopped, and that was in June. So immediately, I am a major foodie. I've had food insecurity in my life. It was just more than I could handle. And I started reaching out to Commissioner Woodward, what can we do? Put together a really good group with Oakland Intermediate Schools, Congresswoman Haley Stevens, Teresa Rich, who's a major community activist and attorney, and Wanda Cook Robinson. Lori was there. And it was just a great team, and we started brainstorming on what we could do. Well, Haley Stevens is committed to doing something. As some of you may have heard in Governor Whitmer's new budget, she is proposing to include free lunch, free breakfast, free lunches for schools. However, all that's going to take some time. And in the meantime, our kids haven't had free lunch since September. And the way it works is that they're charged a fee for the reduced lunch, and if they don't have it, they build a debt to the school. The school pays it. So over these months, there has been debt accrued for the schools. Wanda Cook Robinson was very effective. She went and talked to the superintendents. They've agreed to put in some money to tide us over until there is some either federal or state action. And so I am looking at taking $100,000 from our special projects fund to give it over to Oakland Intermediate Schools to manage, to pay down the debt, to get kids fed. It'll take us through the end of the year with the matching funds from the superintendents. And Lori, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, we have over 5,000 students in our county that qualify for reduced price meals. And what that means is that their income falls between 130 and 185% over the poverty level. So these kids have really been struggling, especially this year, paying that 30-cent copay for lunch and 40-cent copay for breakfast. So, there's just competing priorities at home with the home budgets, and kids are just coming to school with no money and no lunch. And we really want to help these kids to reduce the stigma and then cover that cost for them this year.
And just the idea of a kid going to school, but he's worried about that money, and he's building debt. It's very stressful, and we have such a focus on kids need to have food in their stomachs to learn well. So that's what this is about, and I'm hoping to engage Andrea Powers, who has a lot of power in getting money moving quicker, so that maybe this money can be distributed by March, and we can start feeding these kids by March. So I need your approval to go forward. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Charles.
Thank you, Commissioner Gershenson, for bringing this to light. And as someone who also had to carry around a little free and reduced lunch card as a kid, for whatever reason, the stigma of only getting that PB&J, if you didn't have any money. And I think that you guys are looking to kind of rectify that.
Absolutely.
The other thing that comes to mind is a lot of times schools will hold back transcripts because of lunch bills that aren't paid. So I think this will be a good step in the right direction. And shout out to Dr. Cook Robinson.
Well, thank you for adding to that, because the amount of stress that the kids go through, and what did you say it was, PB&J? I think now it's a cheese sandwich.
Oh.
Yeah.
And again, you're right. Sometimes they'll say to the kid, you owe too much money, and you're not going to get any.
Right. And you can't learn if you're hungry. Let's just face it.
True.
That's right. That's correct.
Commissioner Woodward.
Yeah, along this, and some folks remember that we launched the Better with Breakfast initiative, and Lori and her team and everybody, a huge success. And I was actually talking to some folks in the governor's office and the governor's team, that it helped fuel the call for, let's wipe out pain, food. Kids going to school should be able to eat. And around this whole notion that on high-stakes test days, we do everything possible to put food in their belly because they perform better.
Right.
They're more focused. So what if we create that experience every day that they're at school? It makes a lot of sense. So this is, this is really important. I think fills a gap between what hopefully can be approved in the next fiscal year's budget for those 5,000 right now that are in that reduced lunch space. So the county's $100,000 is being matched by the individual school districts? Is that?
Do you know how that's going to work, Lori?
Yes, it would be a 50% match. So the school district would cover 50% of the cost associated with this, and then the other 50% would come from the funding from the county.
From the
and
county.
Then Oakland Schools would be the fiscal agent overseeing the claim data and payments to the districts.
Right. And then we could get a report afterwards of this is how many students took advantage of it and what have you.
Absolutely. Great. Yes, absolutely.
Sounds good. The only thing, I'll talk to the sponsor. There might be another pot of money that should come out versus this one, but the concept is good. We'll talk about that later.
I'm open.
That's a fiscal service conversation.
Commissioner Powell.
I just also want to bring light that I think this is a good that we have this on our radar, because we know that there will be a round of cuts in food stamps. So that's just a whole nother area that kids are going to be impacted or affected by this. So I think that that's good that we have this on our radar to help the kids, at least with the school, because I think it's going depending on how that outcome come, I wouldn't be surprised if we have to revisit this and maybe add funds or something, yeah.
Even with stamps and no stamps, the prices.
Right,
Yeah.
prices as well,
Yeah.
right? So there's a lot of pressure on families, particularly in that financial demographic.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else? This just, the fact that we have hungry kids in Oakland County makes me crazy, really. And,
Over 5,500.
Yeah. Now, did the Better with Breakfast program end?
It did, and I was going to talk to Commissioner Woodward about that. That was a partnership with United Way that was sensational.
Well, the thing I liked about that, and I would hope this program, we're talking about, you know, these 5,000 kids, but the thing I liked about the Better with Breakfast program was everybody got it.
Right.
You came to school, you walked in the cafeteria, you could get a granola bar.
Right,
it
and there was
didn't
no
matter
stigma. Right.
what your economic level was, and so you're not identifying those poor kids, you know, that have all the other issues in their lives. At least they don't have to be identified at school as somebody who's poor and only gets the cheese sandwich. That really bothers me that we still have programs like that in 2023. We should be feeding our children. You know, the schools in other countries, they feed them breakfast and lunch, and they're nice looking lunches, you know, so I could go on about this for days. Hungry kids just makes me insane.
Me too.
So I am totally in support of this. And what else can we do to get back to like the Better with Breakfast program where everybody gets fed, but let's make it 2 meals a day? What do we have to do that?
Go for
Well,
it.
2 things. So we had a 3-year pilot put in place, and Lori was incredibly helpful to that effort. Huge success, a tremendous amount of data. And what happens is that when you actually saw utilization, and there were some areas we saw a utilization shoot off the charts, those school districts actually brought in a higher reimbursement rate that, there's some rules change, I understand, at the state level that gives them a little flexibility how to use that revenue. So when we say it stopped, there were some school districts that had universal qualification. That's definitely going on. I know of some school districts that they said, like, this was hugely successful. We'll figure it out in our budgets. They also got a huge amount of ARPA dollars that are eligible to be used for these types of things. And then COVID hit, and the president basically said everyone's going to have free. Both presidents, right? Everyone has free, breakfast and lunch, and that's the program that just ended. And so now we're kind of making this window of time to figure out what do we do next. The governor's recommendation is in her budget, and when you look at the total cost statewide, it's not that much. And they're using a lot of Oakland County's data and extrapolating it across the state to figure out what it would cost. It's not that much money. And I'm very optimistic that this legislature is going to, and this governor is going to get that done this year when she presents her budget and adopted October 1. So I guess I'm keeping my fingers crossed it's coming back.
And just a little update on the Better with Breakfast program. The program technically ended right when COVID started because we flipped to universal meals with under the COVID regulations. But many districts continue to do Better with Breakfast. Hazel Park Schools, Walled Lake, West Bloomfield, Lanphier, Clarenceville, Southfield. They started with Better with Breakfast. They implemented it. They had traction going, and they haven't stopped.
Yep.
So even though the funding, the gap funding that we provided for the paid category meals, a lot of districts are just covering that cost themselves with revenues from their district.
Right.
And right now, they're continuing on with the universal breakfast program, whether it's fully funded or not. They're covering the cost with their program.
That's great.
When we
I didn't
started,
know
the question, the question was, and I remember it was being posed to it, and I didn't have an answer at the time. It says, okay, you're gonna do this for 3 years, and then what? And my hope was that it would be so incredibly successful. People would say, it's worth this small investment. We bought the equipments, the carts, we provided the technical assistance, so they didn't have to pay for any of that. We paid for that. And all it is the small gap between. But I think a lot of these school districts also saw in their budget, because they got their utilization up, their reimbursement rates got up, so they actually brought in more money to actually support their food system overall, and that's how they're able to help continue to support this program. So it's, I was hopeful this was going to happen, and I'm glad that it has, and because why wouldn't you let this happen? We had almost a proof of concept. Everyone loves it. Let's keep going, and so it's exactly. But be able to have ongoing funding so that we can do this in every school district across the state, it's huge.
Yes.
And Lori, I'm going to give a shout out to Lori, because Lori, I mean, do you still chair the statewide effort? You are the leader of food nutrition programs for the state, aren't you?
Yes, I'm actually serving as the president of the School Nutrition Association National this year.
Lori is a superstar,
That's right.
and
Thank you, Lori.
she came out of a sick bed to be here today, but she
Yeah,
is
sorry, my
she
voice
is one of the
just-
leaders in this field, and she's been incredibly helpful in making this happen.
My pleasure.
Well, I'm proud we can set an example. Okay, anybody else? Let's feed the kids. All right, let's prompt the vote.
My phone, my iPad died, so yes.
I'll loan you some electricity.
I'm going to take his vote.
See you later, Bob.
I'm sure you have 9 yeas, 0 nays.
Thank you
Okay,
very
motion
much.
carries.
You'll have a report on how this works out.
Thank you for bringing
Lori.
this to us, Commissioner.
We're expecting one.
Thank you very much.
Okay, on to item number 10, Public Health and Safety Committee recommendations. Starting with item 10A, which is positions creation. Need a motion?
I'll move it.
Commissioner Weipert, supported by Commissioner Powell. Do we have somebody to talk to us about this one? No, Mr. Gatt?
Oh, this is one we can't get in.
Was
Which one is this one?
Gatt
This is the
here?
Position one?
If no one's
I
here,
can-
we were in committee yesterday. We can talk
Yeah,
about it.
because I got a blank, well, you know.
So, what happens is the animal shelter has historically used jail trustees to help with cleaning, but because of the pandemic, that had to stop, so then they kind of went it through, if I understand right, like a short-term contract with a company. And now what they'd like to do, though, is bring these staff in-house. So, right, they want 9 staff to be coming in to then do the cleaning, which I think everyone voted yes on it yesterday in committee. And just since I'm talking to you about it and you're still looking at me, I think it's awesome, because paying people 20 cents an hour in jail to clean stuff, but paying people living wages to clean stuff sounds way more in line with our values. And that's what we're going to be doing now with this.
And if I may, I'll just add, I mean,
Commissioner
that
Woodward?
the vendor that we were working with was an extension. They provide other county services, and there was a stopgap because turns out Fido and his little kitty needs to have their cages cleaned and all the stuff that comes with it, and that we have to do that. And I mean, and we want to have a high bar. And this was not in their business model, and the department looked for other options, and there's really not a doggy, kitty cleaning service out there. But maybe there's a market. And so this was, and I think it was mutually agreeable that the vendor just like, yeah, we're not going to be able to keep the level of service at what the animal control facility wants it to be and what it should be. And so this is the hope is that we'll be able to bring on additional staff at the same amount of money that the contract was. Which is, I would argue, is reverse privatization. I was thinking, so I actually generally very supportive of. But it is going to be a long-term cost after this contract expired. We used ARPA-related dollars to fund it up for a period of time, but at some point we're going to have to come up with the $500,000+ that this costs. And the conversation in committee also dealt with maybe addressing, increasing the census of dog licenses. Like, so, I mean, if you have a dog older than 4 months, you have to have a dog license per state law. If the county provides animal control services for that jurisdiction, it keeps it. If your city provides those services separately, the city keeps it. But maybe looking at adjusting and possibly raising those fees to offset this cost to be able to take care of the animals that find themselves into the shelter. But that's, so for the budget committee, all of you, I think it's something that's it seriously needs to be looked at on deck for when you guys start doing the budget review process.
So just to clarify, before COVID hit, before ARPA dollars, we were basically using trustees, inmates, which to us was free.
Right.
In air quotes, free. So now we can't do that anymore because we have many less inmates, and the ones that we have left are not the kind of individuals we want to have in these kinds of positions because we can't necessarily.
I think as the sheriff office, the people, the bad people and the people we're mad at. And the people that we're mad
This is the
at.
people we're afraid
Mad at?
of, not the people.
Afraid of, right.
people
We'd be
we're-
mad at, but, okay, and then there's people we're afraid of.
So basically,
Right.
in our
There's
jail
less
right
mad
now, we
people.
have those difficult folks that we don't want to just have out in animal
Exactly.
control or doing grounds or the kinds of things we used to have trustees do. So that gives us a big budget hole, but the cages still need to be cleaned and the animals still need to be fed in a humane way. And so
Barb Hanke would say that she was here in New Year's cleaning cages because there
Yes.
wasn't, I mean, and we had a contract with a
Right.
firm and couldn't get the people in to do it, so.
So I think your warning is good. We have 6 months to figure out where that $500,000 is going to come from, but it wasn't in the budget before.
And commissioners are all invited to clean doggy and kitty cages.
I've been
so.
trying to talk my husband into coming out and walking dogs while I'm in meetings more than once, but.
That works too.
He'd have been here all day if we'd have done that today. So anyway, let's, if nobody else has, Commissioner Rahman.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. One quick question is I appreciate that it's budget neutral for the time being.
For the time.
But I guess my one question is in terms of determining that it's going to take 10 full-time staff members, I don't know. It's in full disclosure, I haven't been there, so I don't know exactly how big a scale we're talking. But obviously, 10 full-time, 40 hours a week, is there somebody, or how did we come to the conclusion that that's exactly what we need? It just seems like a lot of people to me, be on the outside looking in.
I would think it's 2 shifts.
It's also, right, it's not just cleaning the cages, it's also the feeding and also the laundry.
Yeah.
So,
It's
I don't
two
know if
shifts
that.
of people, so it's
Yep.
probably 4 or 5 per shift.
You got a pretty big adoption.
Yeah, it is big.
They have 300, looking at the chart we got just a few days ago on how many animals are in the shelter, there's about 350 animals in the shelter at any given time. So,
I have to imagine that it's a little bit based on what the contract was, so we probably had some FTE amount in that existing contract, and we're trying to replace it, or whatever the FTE was, it wasn't enough to be able to do what needed to be done, or clean on the schedule that was faster. But I know that Mr. Gatton can share that information, but I think it's the fact that this fits within the same amount of money that we were basically paying a vendor to do, I mean, I think that's the justification of like why it makes sense, we think. But we need to, we still need it's a budget hole, it's a budget issue in the future when the designated money for it no longer there. And I think frankly, there are ways to recover it appropriately off the fees that support an animal control system.
and these salaries that these people are going to get, they fall under the county salary, so they will get that $15 minimum wage. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Just wanted to make sure.
Fought for that.
Well, and that should incentivize some folks to maybe want to take these jobs who live nearby or whatever, so it's, yeah. Okay.
You got more routes to get you there.
I know.
Right. All right, anybody have any more comments, questions? Commissioner Cavell?
Well, I just wanted to say, I liked what you were saying, Chair, about we've been relying on trustees for some time, and that's been something that's been like normal in our culture here in local government, but that shift brought on in part by COVID, and as the sheriff said yesterday, by changes in like court rules and all this sort of stuff about who goes to jail and why. One is like just the changing nature of justice, and so I think from our group, that culture shift is very positive, but part of the consequence is we're gonna have to pay more for stuff that we've been just using subsidized labor in an arguably immoral way for like 150 years, and now we can't do that anymore, so, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Cavell.
So that's what you said, so I'm just saying, go you, Gwen.
Okay, so let's prompt the vote.
I'll voice. Voice?
Yes.
Charles?
Yes.
Yes.
Powell, yes, okay.
Woodward, yes.
Woodward, yes. Hoffman's not here. Rahman?
Yes. I got another one. Did you get mine, Pam, already?
Yes.
Okay, so I just got another prompt.
Yeah, just Mr. Hoffman, who was not here.
Yeah, Hoffman.
Madam Chair, you have 8 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, thank you.
No.
I do really like.
All right, next up then is kind of related, appropriating additional funding for purposes of executing a new contract to provide inmate food services at the Oakland County Jail. I need a motion. Commissioner Weipert, supported by Commissioner Charles. All right.
Yep, working.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Good afternoon, everyone.
So, Gay up here, Sheriff Fiscal Officer, and I have Captain Vida from the jail. And I believe the undersheriff is on. He had a 1 o'clock commitment, but I think he might be clear now, so he's virtual. Okay, so basically, I'll give you a little overview of this. We were at committee yesterday. So the jail food services contract was up for expiration, so we sent an RFP out in September of 2022. So it's been a long, laborious process, and we're finally, hopefully, at the end. We're here to ask you for an additional appropriation to cover the increased cost in food and staffing. So obviously, there's a lot of external factors. Everybody has experienced increases in food costs, and, you know, obviously, staffing issues continue to plague us after the pandemic. So the current year cost per meal that we have is just under 82 cents a meal, and the new proposal for year one is up to $1.26 per meal. Obviously, we've learned a lot through the pandemic, and as the previous item stated, that we don't have the inmate workers that we used to. So our former business model was based on having trustee workers in the kitchen at all times to serve all meals. Since the pandemic and throughout the pandemic, we've had a fluctuating number of people that have been able to help. So what we had them do is scenario-based pricing to say if we had, you know, between 75 and 100% inmates, or if we had 50% inmates or whatever, that the cost would fluctuate. So if we couldn't provide the required number of inmates, then our cost per meal would go up. But then we also included a contingency in there that says if we have to supply any labor, like a deputy or anybody helping any of the sheriff's office staff, like we had to do in the pandemic, then we would also get a discounted rate for that. So we would track the hours and then get the according or the related discount. So, like I said, post-pandemic, we had to add contingency plans in that we didn't really have in place before because nobody had ever experienced anything like that, and we never really had a disruption in service. And then religious meals are another topic that we had to make sure was in this new agreement. It wasn't, I would say it probably wasn't really solid in the last agreement, but there's been some legislation and some litigation since that time, and so we have to make sure that those are rock solid, so we included that in this. As you stated with inmate workers, we use them for food services. We used to use them for laundry, and then we had to shut that down during the pandemic, so we don't have enough for that. So we're contracting that out using ARPA dollars with a local dry cleaner. Jail cleaning, we're using the contracted service right now that the animal shelter was using, so the countywide contract. We used to provide services for parks. We used to do Children's Village laundry, and then we used to clean the animal shelter. So there's a lot of gaps in services that we've run into after the pandemic. So the sheriff's office worked with the county executive's office throughout the RFP process. The evaluation team consisted of Captain Vida, another lieutenant at the jail, 2 people from the administrative services team at the sheriff's office, our financial analyst from fiscal services, and then our purchaser, or our buyer from purchasing. So it was a multi-department evaluation team. So we're here today to ask for the additional appropriation because we can't continue final negotiations on the contract until we get approval from the board. The lowest qualified bidder in this process was Aramark, which is still our current vendor. Our current budget is $1.3 million. The amendment that we're requesting over the next 3 years is an additional $1.5 million. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. I will open the floor up to the commission. I see Commissioner Woodward wants to go first.
If I can put some context, particularly for newer members, I mean, this has been a subject of interest. The reason why this is before us in this way, in part, is because this was one of these contracts that was pulled off of the approval process and our budget process. This food service contract has had a lot of discussion. Myself, I believe that the majority caucus, when this last was up, opposed for a variety of reasons that I don't need to go in right now. We go through this process, and I think the team does a very good job. But I think it also brings to attention in that process, lifted up not. While the COVID certainly exacerbated some of the labor challenges and requirements necessary to staff it, there were challenges before that. The reality is finding individuals who are willing to work for these wages. This is tough, and this job market's even tougher. And it's put situations in which when you need a human to do it, our sheriff deputies had to be drawn off of their other jobs, arguably probably filled with other people to do those jobs, probably over time, in the county eating that cost. And I'm a big believer that if this is going to be a privatized service, that we shouldn't have to eat those costs if the vendor doesn't provide at what the contractual arrangement is supposed to be. And I believe that there is. I think there's notation, but the contract is supposed to have a $90. Is it $90 per hour per employee that if sheriff staff has to be put into this role to fill it to help cover that, and we want to make sure that that's part of that contract. The other thing, I think it was also raised, that the staffing model was not appropriate. To provide the appropriate supervision, and because the no-show issues. And so I think it's really important that we, as the board, as the fiduciary oversight, but we also build in a mechanism to do performance audit and evaluation, and not just on this particular contract, but I think any of these contracts of this scale and this size. We do auditing. And as the board, we're tasked to do all the auditing, but we don't always necessarily do a performance audit to make certain that all the things we're saying, like contractor agrees to do X, Y, and Z, and are we tracking, making sure that the food that we are purchasing at the meal cost, like the 54% increase, certainly food has gone up, is held to, that we're not buying this and then getting something of lower quality or a less amount, even if it still satisfies all statutory state nutritional requirements. So as a result of all of that, and I guess I don't want to, what I'm about to say should not in any way reflect that I have questioned the integrity of the bid process, but I have looked at, basically there were 3 vendors that applied, 2 that rose to the top, about 20% weighted towards price, 70% on this the technical evaluation. One vendor scored better in the technical side. One vendor scored better on the price size. Both of those vendors were brought in and asked, to learn a little bit more about their option, and ultimately was asked for a best or final offer to come back. And the hope was to help bring this cost down, because another reason we're before here is because this is $1.5 million over of what we had approved in the budget to spend on these types of services. And so, I'm sharpening the pencil in making sure that we have greater scrutiny on these to control costs, realizing we live in a time. But from a budgetary perspective, and all of you and the Finance Committee, that, is it just going to be the food contract, or are we going to see this type of, significant hike above what we planned on a whole host of other things? How does that impact the budget planning going forward, and working with our CFO? This is an ongoing conversation. So in that bid process, it comes back. Everyone gave their final offer, and it was communicated. The prices didn't really change. If you read it, there were some price differences. Some people, they decreased their inflationary costs over time. But we didn't have really, to my satisfaction, an apples-to-apple comparison. We had 7 employees under the Aramark contract, 12 with a competitor bid. I mean, I don't know if we didn't ask, like, well, can you give us the price at 7 people? So it's an apples-to-apple comparison. We also, in terms of the meals, 2 hot meals, 1 cold, is that what the?
2 hot, 1 cold.
Well, right. And I believe the other bid had 3 hot meals in it. And so that's going to impact costs. And so if we really, to get a true sense of what this costs, and that's why you go through a competitive bid process, and I mean, and all the people involved, and this is something we have to do, and we want quality meals, and nothing will disrupt a jail than bad food, and no food, or crappy food, and it makes it unsafe for our incredible staff that's working there as well. So we have to do this, but I think that there's a lot, I mean, because of the past and because of, the scrutiny, that I think that we've got to build in a system to make sure that all parties are living up to their piece. And so I would, if we move, there's 2 things I would say. If we move forward with this, I mean, looking at a shorter approved contract with multiple year extensions, and then approving only the amount for that shorter distance, and using that opportunity to come back to make certain, are we hitting the performance metrics necessary to do this? Also, I mean, the world is changing very much, and so inflation's what it is now. I'm hopeful, I mean, listening to the Fed and other things, that inflation growth will drop considerably, and I would prefer not to pay for inflation growth that's in excess of what reality is at the given moment. I do realize, and I do want to thank the incumbent provider, that the 82 cents and that rate that was negotiated way back when was to, I mean, a lot of negotiated efforts to do that, to keep costs down. And so I mean, again, I'm recognizing that costs are going to go up. That's a big leap. Certainly but it's the sign of the times, and we need vendors. There's not a huge number in this space, but we need to be able to be mindful of that. And so we can talk about the whether it's a 1-year contract with 4-year extensions, or a 2-year contract with 3 1-year extensions, and then appropriating the dollars that come with it is the first thing to put out there. And the second is, I know that we're looking for what would be in the contract. But is it possible to have a contract? We have a scope of work, but is it possible to have the contract at least prior to the board meeting? Because I think it's really important that we see, the stuff that we say is going to be in there, or at least expressly say these following things must be in the contract. And we can enumerate those. I guess we can go that way too. But if the contract could be made available prior to adoption, would be my preference.
Okay. Mr. Guzzi's here. Can he answer that for us?
Well, Dave, to answer your question on the contract, there's a good possibility we could have a good draft for you before the board meeting. We probably will attack this. We'll use the old contract terms and conditions, and we've updated our contract, so it'll be new stuff. And we could go in with the draft. The scope of services, they have that draft
Yeah,
piece.
that's
And
right.
there might be some things tied, that we can add into that. And we work with Nicole's group. Actually, she's assigned to this one, because anything.
That's why you're here. She's also our attorney, everybody.
Anything over 500,000, we work hand in hand. Yeah, so. You want to?
Yeah, hi, everybody. Nicole Tabin, if you don't know me. We most certainly can draft a contract like that, with one caveat. I will have to go back and look at the RFP to make sure that the language allows for that without substantially changing what went out on the RFP. Because if so, if prices were bid out for a 3-year term instead of just please bid out prices annually, that might affect things. Okay. We've had that problem in the past. Yeah.
Well, then we should definitely make sure that no RFP ever goes out that way, because right now there's no ability unless we appropriate more monies for this contract. That's one. I think it's. I think this. The incumbent provider came in. And I have faith in the people who did the evaluation. I raised some of those other issues because it's like I asked our staff to I want to see apples to apple comparison. And there's just a lot of gray there, and I just think that we've got to figure out how to do that. But just given history and challenge, I think it's important that we make certain, and when I say history and challenge, this is not an Aramark problem. It's just like, this is I think it's very difficult to find employees that can reliably be there and be trained in this economy to do this work. And I just want us to be able to be in a position to take advantage of cost-saving measures in the future, because the other underlying question, I'm not quite sure where this money comes from, not just today, but for the rest of time. Like, this is dollars that's not used for, and Gaia very much said that she wasn't volunteering to find it in her budget. That's what you like. So it's coming. Coming out of our general fund, and then it starts. Well, how much are we looking at this for other things? So I think from a fiduciary responsibility, that's how we should be looking at it.
And Dave, can I add on the contract? All our contracts, we do have 3 termination clauses.
Right.
So we can terminate for breach, for convenience, or if we don't have the money appropriated. So,
Right.
that is in all of them, all the time.
Which is why appropriate for a lower amount of front term, and then we can continue the conversation. But the reality is that we need to provide this service, and we have an incumbent provider who's been providing for a very long time, and and look forward to continuing to work with them. But I think on the performance auditing process, and I think just given the sizable increase over a budget, it just happens to be this, but I think frankly, I would look at every contract over a certain amount that we should probably try to be built in a system to do those performance evaluations to make certain that we're getting what we are supposed to be getting and what we're paying for, and instead of just whether it's a dollar or cents invoice transaction.
Commissioner Charles, followed by Commissioner Cavell.
Thank you, and I appreciate all of the hard work that looks like it went on behind the scenes. I was going to start off by saying you lost me at Aramark, and I still feel that way. And I just want Oakland County to always be that shining light on the hill when it comes to some of these services. And so I guess all I can ask, I'm not quite sure where I stand yet with this particular measure, and since we still have our main meeting to come where we'll get to vote on this in full. But I would like to know that the county executive, the sheriff, perhaps even our chair, are having periodic meals over there and unannounced. Like, no one needs to know that they're planning to eat that day. Because historically, Aramark has just been not really good in the media as far as how they are servicing jails coast to coast. So I prefer a whole nother vendor. I wouldn't even mind if it costs more, because inmates are suing municipalities for the food that they are receiving, and I would hate to see us in that way. So nothing better than checks and balances is to actually eat the food. School board members, eat that elementary school food and make sure that it's something you would eat or serve to your family. And I do feel, I appreciate this scope of work, where it talks about how to prepare and plan and document these meals, where these meals have to come from, how they have to be served temperature-wise, the trays that they're being served on. We haven't talked about greening the jails in any way. So all of these things are definitely pertinent to me. So I just thought, why not mention it now? But yeah, the vendor themselves, I'm not motivated by cost. I know it's not my money, but I'm not motivated by cost. I'm motivated by efficiency and proper service. Just because you're in jail, maybe you don't get the vegan meal, but you certainly should be able to eat food that's proper for humans. I'll leave it at that.
So just for context, if I may, so Aramark's price is, the increase would be 1.5 over the next 3 years. And as we mentioned in committee yesterday, the next vendor, it was 3.8 million. So there was a significant cost increase. And if I could just clarify, so Aramark currently has 7 employees, but they proposed 9.
I'm sorry.
Yep. And then the other vendor had 12.
Had
So
12.
So
Which
for
is,
that,
but you guys will understand, it's like, okay, so that's 3 more people, that's baked into those prices, right?
Sure.
So, I guess, like, what is the number that we need to have at the jail? And if it's 9, we should be telling the vendors 9 people. Now, if a vendor says, there's no way I'm gonna do that with just 9 people, that's a different story. But the lack of an apple-to-apple comparison.
Well, and I think we're still in a learning curve
That's
too,
true.
because we're trying to find our new normal. We never had to rely on that amount of staffing. They had this many staff and we had this many trustees, and it was a pretty symbiotic relationship. We don't have that with the fluctuations now. And then just for Commissioner Smith-Charles, I can only speak to obviously, every big corporation is gonna have issues. I don't think there's any vendor of ours that probably, if we looked for something, we could find something. But with my experience, the people that have been assigned to our contract, I mean, it's not flawless, but the district manager, anytime that we've had an issue, my team has been able to make a call, and if they're not here today, they're within a couple of days, and we're having a sit down, and we are correcting any situation that's happened. So I can only speak to what's happened in the Oakland County Jail and not for other, their service to other jails.
I appreciate that.
Commissioner Cavell?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question. Do you know the pay floor for the 7 to 9 or 12 employees? Was that, you mentioned
So
this
right now,
yesterday.
in the proposals,
Yeah.
the RFP proposals, Airmark pay scale was starting at 17 an hour, with the expectation that all employees would be paid 18 to 22 at some point, plus benefits. And then that was for regular employees. They did not provide a manager pay rate that I'm aware of. So the other vendor, they didn't have a regular rate. They had supervisors at $20 to $21 an hour and managers at 35 to 38. So again, not apples to apples, because they didn't have their basic workers, so.
Okay.
But at a minimum, that seems to be what is proposed, the $17 an hour for
Okay.
a general worker.
Thank you. And just to go back to what, you said, Chair Markham, about the animal control and just thinking about this, we are going through a culture shift. We can no longer rely on trustees to be the subsidized staff to do this work, which is part of why the cost increase is happening, which is a culture shift that we are valuing and appreciating. And so, to what you said, Commissioner Charles, the checks and balances being there and being willing to pay more for that quality. And I mentioned this yesterday, but just to say it again, that, right, a big corporation, as was mentioned, or a for-profit entity or something that is not from Oakland County or from this state is inherently seeking profit, which from a government perspective and us as the people that are supposed to control the money and be judicious about it, we are helping another company in another place gain wealth off of over 1,000 people and their families in jail right now. So I like Chair Woodward's idea of making sure we have increased oversight and quality and still taking into account the cost, but recognizing this culture shift is here to stay and worthwhile in our minds. And I'd also like to suggest for conversation or perhaps bringing up at the board meeting or introducing it or writing into communications, a study group to review this ongoing. That would be fully collaborative, right, with you, Captain Vida, and everyone else. But just to make sure we are actually not just putting more Band-Aids on something that is just, as Gabe mentioned, right, like in an unknown situation, just so we can get our hands around it.
Thank you. So
If
we
I-
need a motion of some
Okay.
sort.
I'll make a couple but if I can say just 2 quick things. I think to the point that Commissioner Cavell was talking about, there's a couple layers here. Like years ago, this was done in-house, and our commissary was run in-house. And then we moved to a privatization space where a lot of public entities were going to that way. As costs come up, I think there is a legitimate conversation to be had. Should it be brought back in-house? And I think perfect example is what we just approved with the cleaning of the cages. Like, in terms of to get what we want, it's better to do that. It's going to come with a cost. We got to figure out a way to pay for it and all that type of stuff. But that determination is also reversing, going in a direction, bringing something in-house. And we don't have a subject matter expert on food service in a jail, and I think it's probably worth exploring I mean, and again, if we could go and redo this from the very beginning, maybe that would have been worthwhile to invest. I'm going to say that I actually had an amendment to put up there that went down early, I mean, unrelated to this one, but to something else, to better position us for this. But I think when we look at, and again, this is outside an Aramark contract. This is like broadly and how we think from an operational point of view, how we fund this going forward. The other aspect that we really haven't talked about that's part of this contract is the commissary system, I mean, service. And I know I asked for like what's the split and what's the, like, do you have, okay, so we bring in revenue, but it's also, I mean, it's the moneymaker. And I asked and it's not a surprise because there's like the stuff that's like served to eat, and then it's like, if you spend a little extra money, you might get a burger or other food. And I asked the question, well, who uses? Like, well, like everybody if they could, because I mean, I get it. I mean, $1.26 only goes so far, I guess. So how that all fits into it, like how much revenue we're getting, and I mean, Gay also brought up that obviously during the COVID, that a lot of that shut down, and now as the things come back up, revenue coming in, how much? I mean, if revenue spikes, does it offset our contract? Do we get to deduct it from what we owe? And
So with general commissary, we split 50%.
okay.
What you're talking about, the burgers, the pizza, so
Yeah.
we call that fresh
Fresh
favorites.
favorites, yeah.
So those are hot foods. We have not reinstated that since the pandemic. We just
Okay.
don't have the capability for that.
We don't
And-
have the capability because we don't have the staff to do it.
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
got it.
And then we've.
But
well,
but this will, like, we will have the staff to do it then.
Hopefully, yeah, that's the goal, is to reinstate that, absolutely. And then there's eye care, so that's the third portion of it, so the
Candy
fresh.
bars.
Yeah, no, eye care is, a family member can do it. So a family member can go on and order commissary to have, like,
Got it.
hey, here's a special delivery. So there's 3 different components. So the general is 50%, fresh favorites is 35%, and then eye care is 45%. So those are the commission
And are
splits.
those commission splits, like, was that part of the bid, or was that negotiated?
Yes, it's part of it, and then Earmark has kept the commissary percentages the same in their new proposal.
In the same proposal, okay. So how much, do you have like a pre-pandemic? I mean, I realize that, well, when you're not doing something, it's zero. But what do we think, I mean, if we get back to normal, like, what does that generate?
So I have 2022 numbers, I can get you pre-pandemic, but 2022, we had approximately 633,000 in general commissary, 0 hot foods, and then about 73,000 in eye care, which are the family orders.
Right. And so where does that money go?
That goes into the general fund.
That's the
Our
split,
commission.
that's the total or the, sorry?
That's our share.
Yeah, so we split, and then our share goes into the general fund.
33 plus 73.
And just as a side note too, during the pandemic, to try to get people to incentivize trustees to work, we've also been we pay them bi-weekly with commissary, extra commissary, so.
So they weren't working for free, they get
Exactly.
the sweetener
Yes.
of being able to
that,
use
hey,
it into
you
the
get to-
system.
Yes, you
Got
get to
it.
buy additional commissary, and I think that's been going over pretty well, so, what'd you say?
Okay.
It's a motivator, for sure.
Right, so, okay, again, there's a lot here, I mean, I know actually this side of the table has been around for all the Aramark conversations. I don't know if that side of the table has been. You're new. So, like I said, how all this interplays, subject matter experts, monitoring this, working with the provider, and like I said, I don't want to call into question the integrity of, our process. In the best and final offer, when I looked at the letter, I think it would be, if we want to get prices of what X, Y, and Z is, we should say, we want this level of staffing. That's what we believe is necessary to keep everyone safe and provide that satisfactory supervision. We want this level of minimum compensation for employees. We want, these types of things, when we push that out there, so that people are offering, everyone's doing the same thing, because if you look at the final, and again, I don't know, staff has it if people want to look at all the other stuff, they don't even necessarily completely line up, and they're both proposals, they're both vendors, they both are experienced in this space. But if this is going to mean, if this is 1.5 million over here, and I would expect over 5 years it's going to be even more, that I think we need to do our due diligence to keep that cost low as possible, but also to Commissioner Charles and others' comments is like, we also want quality, and I think there's a conversation about how to accomplish that. So I will make a motion and I'm open to negotiation, on this, but I would make a motion to approve a one-year contract with one-year appropriation with 4-year extensions.
Is that an amendment?
What?
Is that an amendment to the current resolution, or?
It probably would be. Yes. That's probably right. Isn't it on the table? Isn't it?
It's on the
It's already
table
on the
already,
table.
I think.
Yeah, we have a resolution on the table right now.
Okay, let me bring, where is it? Where is it?
It says 3-year in the.
So just a
Here we go. So I would move to make it, well, wait, now everybody approves.
So the
I would say,
1.5, is that for all 3 years? Is that 1.5 per year?
Yeah, so it'd be for $304,600 per this other thing.
You got it, Dave?
Yeah, it's right here, $304,600 for fiscal year 2023. But does that bring us out a year? Yes.
Because we're in 22, so it'd be October to October, so October 24, right?
This,
Correct. The 304,000 would cover March through September, so it wouldn't be a full
it wouldn't be a
12
full
months.
year?
Yeah, we had to prorate it because we extended the last one through.
We can work out the mechanics of the budget amendment before the
There we
full
go. So we
board.
can make, so we'll put 304,000 there, but it's going to change or something. The whole idea is to fund the 1 year, 4-year extensions, and basically all of this. Does that make sense?
Yes. Do you want to add an amendment to create a study group or something, or no?
Well,
Can I just interrupt for a second? Because she needs to leave.
Okay.
And we want to make sure we have enough people for the closed session.
After
Okay,
this,
so you'll be here,
I can wait.
2, 3, 4, okay, we have enough. Okay. Sorry to interrupt, but
Okay, no problem.
we've only been here
So
for 12 hours.
it would be,
Okay, say again, we'll get
I'm
serious.
just checking, is there anything here? Okay, so it literally, okay, so it's just an amendment to change that number of $1,544,500. For the time being, my amendment will be just to swap that for $304,600, but we're gonna probably have to change that between now and the floor to get the exact number to go all the way. But I'm just pulling off what was in the attachment here. And then say, executing a new, make that 1-year contract with 4 1-year extensions.
Am I allowed to interrupt?
Okay,
Yes.
somebody
If you-
gonna
well, you
support that?
I just want to make sure they got it, and then you can interrupt.
Jumble. Yeah.
So just swap out the number, 1 year, 4-year, 1-year extensions.
1 year for 4-year extension
1 year
contract.
and 4 1-year extensions.
and 4 1-year extensions. Okay.
And you're seconding.
And I think Mr. Guzzi has.
Just a question. Because
Commissioner
of
Charles.
logistics and the time with the study group, I don't know, it might be, I would suggest a 2-year with 3 1-year, just for the reason of, I know how much it will take any new vendor, or especially if we would come back and do it in-house, to put this together. I'm just throwing it out there.
Oh, I think that. I think there's a lot of, I think there's, you've gone from September to now, it probably is a year-long process evaluation, and we have a vendor in place. And I'll be honest, like, I'm operating that I expect to fully appropriate all these dollars over the time, period, until until a better solution that costs money or improves service, presents itself magically. But I guess what do people feel?
Commissioner Cavell?
I understand what you're saying, and I think that makes sense, but also so does the board using its prerogative to then that's part now of the process of, you're gonna be working on it, so perhaps we could keep it at the 1 years with extensions, but again, what the group wants, and as long as it's not too complicated or overwhelming for staff, wouldn't, okay.
We've, like he said, we've been working on it for 6 months already, so we have a lot of things to do, so it's less than.
Some of us have been watching this for 15 years.
Nicole has something she wants to add.
No, I mean, the whole overwhelming for staff, I would say a 1-year contract of this size and importance is a big ask because there's a lot of staff involved. I would also recommend a 2-year just for stability. It can still be reviewed. Again, I'm going to remind you all of Mr. Guzzi's reminder that in every contract, we have that ability to terminate. So just keep that in mind, but I would recommend 2 years just to give all parties that stability that's needed for something as important as feeding inmates.
Okay,
So.
that's fair.
Can I jump in here also, real quick?
Sure.
Hello.
Sorry. All right. Yeah, I would like to second that 2-year option. We have a lot of things going on at the sheriff's office, and it does take resources to sit down and try and work on this. But the more important thing I really want to say is, please know there, maybe not to the extent you're thinking of, but I mentioned this yesterday, there is a form of quality assurance. As we have 1,100 people we feed, and they let us know right away that the quality is not good. And we don't want to serve bad quality food because it makes headaches for us that we don't want. So trust me when I tell you, when it's not quality, we make Airmark aware.
Well, that's
Very
good.
glad to hear that.
So what do people
So-
prepare?
Sure, two, okay.
Two and
As long as
I'm
there's
hearing a
accountability.
consensus that we're looking at 2 years with 3 1-years. So that was Commissioner
Looking around,
Woodward's.
I think two's okay with people, okay.
Yeah.
Now, when someone told me earlier, okay, two. Two, that's
Well, we didn't hear their perspective
fair,
earlier.
that's fair,
So
okay,
2 years
so.
with 3 1-year
Yeah,
extensions.
that's
So if
good.
we modify that, which means, why don't you put, yeah, whatever the number, and I, at minimum, just add the fiscal 23 and 24 for now. It might have to also change, but it's a little bit longer runway, so maybe not as much, but, yeah, so whatever that number, instead of 300,000, it would be closer to 880.
Okay.
Okay?
So that's the motion.
And the goal is to try to get a contract before the board meeting? That could be part of this, and that would be great. Okay.
We already had a.
Yeah, Commissioner Charles already supported, so thank you. All right. If there's,
I just changed my amendment.
Yeah.
so we're voting on the amendment, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's prompt the vote on the amendment to a 2-year with 3 1-year extensions contract.
Did you get it, Heidi?
Anybody not getting it, let me know.
I didn't get it.
All right.
Oh, I got it now.
Okay.
Just when you did that, yeah, no, just when she said that.
Charles?
I
got it. Okay.
No.
And refresher.
I mean, I'd like to. Or at least.
Stake in its union.
Okay. Yay. Okay, Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas and 0 nays.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Oh, and now, that's right, that was just the amendment. Again, I need an apple. So let's go to the main motion as amended. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not my fault. Oh, I'm gonna have to refresh too. Mine's not either, Pam. I
There we go.
refreshed
Sorry.
too. That's all right.
Oh, here it is.
I refreshed mine too, let's see.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas and 0 nays.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Next up, item 11C, Sheriff's Office grant application with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources for the 2023 Marine Safety Program. Moved by Commissioner Long, supported by Commissioner Charles.
Okay, so this is our annual application for marine safety. This year, we're applying for all eligible expenses for $625,907. Unfortunately, we apply for the max we're eligible for each year and don't get nearly that. Last year, we ended up with an award of $166,600. So, I mean, we're always hopeful for more, and we apply for everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're seeking your approval to apply.
Okay. Need a motion? Commissioner
we did.
Charles?
Oh, we had them all.
Oh, did we do that?
Yeah.
Again. Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about what happened in committee yesterday, because Commissioner McGilvery mentioned that, you know, we have more lakes than
Yes, we
any
do.
other county in Michigan, and yet we can't get what seems to be a reasonable percentage of the dollars that are allocated statewide. I just wondered, is there any action that the board needs to do, or the Public Health and Safety Committee, or whatever, to say to the state, you know, hey, we're over here with more boats, more lakes than anybody in Michigan, but we're not getting our fair share of the marine dollars.
To change the formula, which I think Chair Woodward talked about yesterday too, that we need to, you know, if we could reach out to our
From a
legislators.
legislative point of view, we can have, we don't decide right now, but pull a group together that wants to work on this.
Yeah.
There's two ways to do it. I think it was brought up in that committee. It is to basically change a formula that results in other counties getting less, will create extra opposition to actually passing. Creating a formula that maybe, because this is a result of boat license fees, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yeah,
okay, so
yeah. And
everyone gets their boat license fee, but it's distributed not by where it's licensed, it's by population, I think.
I don't know, well, and
Yeah, it's a
obviously
weird
Michigan's surrounded
calculation.
by Great Lakes, so I think that even, because I don't know if it's, because we have a large population,
Right.
so I think it's a
Oh, might be
combination
the-
formula.
oh, might be
So
the
then it
rate.
could be the, you know,
Right.
the frontage,
the
so
rate.
maybe.
So maybe, again, maybe there needs to be a conversation that the boat license fee needs to, tack on, pick a number, $10, and then that's distributed by population, or some formula that
Right.
more fairly, equitably distributes dollars, so it's, people don't like fee increases, but the reality is that we use this money 100% to support the Marine Division, and this group has appropriated additional funds, and we subsidize it, and then there's equity issues and safety concerns and all that type of stuff, so I think find a way to increase, have more money in the pot, and for that new money, have it distributed on a more fairly thing. It's probably more legislative accomplishable, but we can pull a
So
group,
we could write a letter anyway.
we
I
can
mean,
write a letter
who do
to
we-
our legislators, so we can do that, and we can ask them to introduce a bill, but I would go even more proactive, like, what can we actually get passed?
Right.
And let's start working on that, and ask our Oakland County delegation to build support with their peers to double this pot, or increase this pot, so that we can get more money on a reliable basis.
Right. Okay.
What would be a realistic way to change the formula?
That's basically
Right.
right.
It might be
Let's have the
that, but-
conversation at the state
Probably
level.
so.
Yep.
We need to be represented in that conversation.
We would be happy to accept additional funding.
Right. Okay, so let's go ahead and prompt the vote. On 10C.
Okay.
No.
My prompt, yeah.
Because we changed it. Now I'm confused. More than I was. All right.
Cavell is gone? Okay. Madam Chair, you have 6 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, he's planning to stay, I think he just stepped out. Okay, next up, item 10D, the Sheriff's Office grant application with the Office of National Drug Control Policy for the 2024 High Intensity Drug Trafficking Areas Program.
I'll move it.
Moved by Commissioner Weipert, supported by Commissioner Charles.
Okay, so this is our annual application for HIDA. This year, we're applying for $132,300. It's primarily overtime for narcotics investigators, and then a small portion of it goes to communication services. So we're asking for your approval to apply.
Okay. Anybody else have any comments or questions? If not, let's prompt the vote.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gail. All right, next on the rest of my agenda.
Can we do recess before? Can we do 5-minute recess before that?
Yeah,
Yes.
go to the bathroom, maybe.
Everybody
I know
wants
they're
a
gonna
5-minute
grab our-
recess. Let's get back here at 10 after 2.
Is that good?
Everybody okay with that?
Don't anybody leave.
Don't go home.
Yeah, no. Not yet.
Not yet,
Can't close until.
not till after the vote.
The chair will entertain a motion to go into closed session strategy in the case of Butcher versus Oakland County.
I'll make a motion that we go into closed session for the purpose of, under the Open Meetings Act, for the purpose of consulting our attorneys regarding trial and litigation.
And seconded by Commissioner Cavell. Now we can close. Oh, we have to
Okay, let's
vote.
prompt the vote.
Roll
We have
call.
to vote.
Once the vote comes in and you announce it. Sure. Somebody missing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas and 0 nays.
Okay, motion, we will now move into closed session. our meeting, so we're on here. You want all these back?
Didn't go off the rails with the air marshal,
Here's this.
right? I kept it together.
Yeah, you could have spoke 2.5 hours of that, so.
You could
getting better.
deliver a message that there was, one holdup holding up the vote. If you set this off for tomorrow, we're
I'll
good.
read it. It says, they are authorized to proceed.
Sits in the parking lot at the salon.
I love you, man. I do. I genuinely do.
You know,
You're gonna bankrupt me, but I love it.
Bleeding heart.
the parking lot, and it's impossible to see around it on 8 Mile. I'm calling Southfield Police today. I will not be one of those individuals.
On mute when you're ready.
Okay.
It's like, how do you see? You gotta keep.
With the roundabouts, when they don't.
All right. We are back in open session, and the chair will entertain a motion that Corporation Counsel be authorized to proceed in accordance with the directives discussed in closed session. I need a motion.
So moved.
Commissioner Charles, supported by Commissioner Long. We need a roll call.
Prompt the vote?
Prompt the vote, please. Yes.
Madam Chair, you have 7 yeas, 0 nays.
Excellent. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen.
Good thing Dave gave us a raise. Maybe I should go back and change my
I know
vote. 7 hours.
All right. And
We're still in.
I know.
Thank you. We are still in session. Just so everybody knows, and Commissioner Wiper reminded me, if this is your first closed session, we don't discuss what happened in closed session out of closed session.
Yes.
Like Vegas.
Like Vegas, whatever was said in there,
Well,
turn
and I
in
think
your
just like a
tutus
notion.
now.
So if I may, Madam
Yes,
Chair, I
Commissioner.
want to put people on notice. So working with risk management, and this is going to be the beginning of reviewing a bunch of policies across the board. County operations. So probably one of the first ones that's coming only is because of some time sensitivity that we'll probably be reviewing the the claims review process, including the thresholds of claims review can approve up to a certain threshold, finance can approve up to another threshold, and then possibly raising it above that for the full board to determine. So that's going to come to finance. I told Dee McBroom that we'd try to get it in the next round of committees, but we'll see. There is actually other vendors to be brought in to help support them that they can't do until we take action. So there is some time sensitivity on it. But I just want to let everyone know.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay. Next up, we have item 12, our second public comment.
Like we're not voting on
Is
that.
there anyone here who cares to address the Finance Committee? Seeing no one, I will close public comment. Is there any other business from the commissioners? Commissioner Weipert, were you raising your
No, I
hand?
was logging out.
Oh, okay. With a flourish. Okay, if there's no other business, I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody, for this marathon.
Good job, everyone that was here since 9.
Yeah.